Admiral Jackson Cole stood on the bridge of the massive Imperial flagship Sovereign, staring at the holographic display that showed a small blue planet spinning peacefully in the void. The transmission had arrived just hours ago, and its simplicity made it all the more unsettling. No desperate pleas for mercy, no offers of tribute, no begging for their lives. Just a calm, direct warning delivered in perfect galactic standard. This is Earth. We know you're out there. We know what you do to other worlds. Stay away. Captain Lisa Barnes couldn't contain her amusement as she read the intelligence report for the third time. Sir, our deep space reconnaissance confirms these humans have barely figured out how to travel between their own planets. Their fastest ships would take centuries to reach the nearest star system. They're using primitive fusion drives and basic nuclear technology. Honestly, they're probably 50 years behind the last species we conquered. Cole had been expecting the usual response from a primitive world facing the might of the Galactic Empire. Typically, newly discovered species would either surrender immediately upon seeing Imperial ships, or they would panic and launch desperate attacks with whatever crude weapons they possessed. Some would try to hide, others would attempt to negotiate, and a few would simply go silent and hope to be overlooked. But this message was different. It wasn't a plea or a threat. It was a warning, delivered with the kind of confidence that only came from strength. Another backwater world making empty threats, Cole muttered, but his tone lacked conviction. In his 30 years of service, he had overseen the conquest of hundreds of worlds. Each victory had followed the same pattern. Overwhelming Imperial force would arrive. The local population would realize the futility of resistance, and within days they would surrender unconditionally. The process had become so routine that Cole could predict almost exactly how long each conquest would take based on the species' technological level. Lieutenant Mike Davis, the fleet's tactical officer, looked up from his console where he had been updating the conquest records. 52 worlds this year alone, sir. The Centauri colonies fell in 6 days. The mining worlds of Kepler took only 4. Even the warrior clans of Vega surrendered within a week once they saw our firepower. Make it 53 then, Cole said, but something was nagging at him. The message played again in his mind. The humans had said they knew what the Empire did to other worlds. That suggested surveillance, intelligence gathering, long-term observation. Most primitive species only learned about the Empire when Imperial ships appeared in their skies. Cole turned to face the bridge crew, his decorated uniform bearing the insignia of countless successful campaigns. Actually, belay that order. Send scout ships first. I want a full reconnaissance of their system before we commit the main fleet. The bridge fell silent. Admiral Cole never hesitated during conquests. His decisiveness and overwhelming tactics had made him the Empire's most successful commander. But something about this transmission had shaken that certainty. Dr. Helen Carter, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, stepped forward from her workstation. She had been studying the cultural and technological patterns of conquered species for over a decade, and her expertise had proven invaluable in predicting how different civilizations would respond to Imperial conquest. Admiral, there's something you should know about these humans. While reviewing our archaeological data from recently conquered worlds, my team discovered something unusual. We found evidence of human observation posts on at least 12 different planets we've conquered in the past 5 years. Cole's expression darkened. Observation posts? Yes, sir. Small, well-hidden installations designed for long-term surveillance. The oldest ones we found date back nearly 20 years. They've been watching our expansion, studying our methods, documenting our technology. Dr. Carter pulled up holographic images showing the discovered installations. These aren't random outposts, Admiral. They're strategically placed to observe key Imperial operations. Someone has been conducting a systematic intelligence-gathering operation against us. Captain Barnes frowned as she studied the images. But, sir, that would mean these humans have faster-than-light capability that's far more advanced than our intelligence suggests. How else could they establish surveillance posts across multiple star systems? Either our intelligence is completely wrong, Cole said slowly, or these humans are far more sophisticated than they're letting us believe. He paused, considering the implications. Prey species don't typically spend decades studying their predators unless they're planning something. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. The idea that a supposedly primitive species had been conducting covert surveillance operations throughout Imperial space was deeply disturbing. It suggested a level of planning and capability that contradicted everything they thought they knew about human civilization. Lieutenant Davis pulled up the tactical analysis of Earth's solar system. Sir, if they've been watching us for 20 years, they know our standard conquest protocols. They know how we operate, what weapons we use, how we organize our fleets. Which means, Dr. Carter added quietly, they've had 20 years to prepare for our arrival. Cole stared at the peaceful blue planet on the display, but now it seemed far less innocent. If the humans had been planning for decades, if they had been studying Imperial tactics and technology, then their simple warning took on an entirely different meaning. This wasn't the desperate bluff of a primitive species. This was a calculated message from an enemy that knew exactly what was coming. The Admiral's blood ran cold as the full implication sank in. For the first time in his career, Jackson Cole wasn't sure he was a predator in this situation. 6 months had passed since Admiral Jackson Cole first received that unsettling warning from Earth. During those months, he had assembled the largest conquest fleet in Imperial history. 300 warships, including 12 massive dreadnoughts, filled the void of space as they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. Cole had learned from experience that overwhelming force usually ended conflicts before they could truly begin. No species had ever resisted when faced with such devastating firepower. The Admiral stood on the bridge of the Sovereign, watching the tactical displays light up with friendly ship markers. His fleet stretched across thousands of kilometers, a sight that had made entire civilizations surrender without firing a single shot. But as the sensors began their sweep of the human home system, Cole felt that same nagging unease that had troubled him 6 months ago. Report, Cole demanded, his voice carrying the authority of countless successful campaigns. Communications Officer Tom Wilson looked up from his console, confusion written across his face. Sir, initial scans show no military presence whatsoever. No defense platforms, no orbital weapons, no armed vessels of any kind. It's like they have no military at all. Captain Lisa Barnes leaned over her tactical display, double-checking the readings. That can't be right. Every species develops some kind of defense force, especially after they achieve space travel. She ran the scans again, but the results remained the same. Admiral, I'm detecting standard civilian traffic around their outer planets, mining operations, research stations, but nothing that could threaten even our smallest escort vessel. Cole had expected to find desperate defensive preparations. Usually, when Imperial fleets arrived, they would encounter hastily assembled defense fleets, orbital mines, planetary shields, or at least some attempt at resistance. The complete absence of military preparation was more unsettling than the fiercest opposition he had ever faced. What about their population centers? Cole asked, moving closer to the main display that showed Earth growing larger as they approached. Lieutenant Ray Thompson, the fleet's sensor specialist, adjusted his instruments for a more detailed planetary scan. Sir, that's where it gets strange. I'm reading major population centers across the planet, but... He paused, running the scan a third time confirmed what he was seeing. But what, Lieutenant? The cities are empty, sir. New York, London, Tokyo, Delhi, every major city that should house millions of people shows no life signs. But all the infrastructure is running normally. Power grids are operational, traffic control systems are active, even the streetlights are working on schedule. Captain Barnes felt a chill run down her spine. That's impossible. You don't just evacuate billions of people overnight. Dr. Helen Carter, who had been monitoring the biological sensors, stepped forward with her own disturbing findings. Admiral, the smaller settlements in rural areas showed the same pattern. Farms are maintained, automated systems are running, but no human life signs anywhere. It's as if the entire planetary population simply vanished. Cole stared at the blue and green world that filled the main view screen. Earth looked peaceful, almost inviting. White clouds drifted over green continents and blue oceans. Cities sparkled with lights in the darkness of the planet's night side. Everything appeared normal, except for one impossible detail. There were no people. Where did they go? Cole whispered, more to himself than to his crew. The question hung in the air like a physical presence. In 30 years of conquest, Cole had never encountered anything like this. Species either fought desperately to defend their homeworlds or surrendered quickly to preserve their populations. No one simply abandoned their entire planet. That's when the transmission came through, crackling across all communication frequencies simultaneously. The same calm, measured voice that had delivered the original warning 6 months ago. "We warned you once. You should have listened." Cole spun toward his communications officer, source of that transmission now. Tom Wilson's hands flew over his controls, trying to triangulate the signal's origin. His instruments swept across frequencies, analyzed signal strength, and processed directional data. But the readings made no sense. "Admiral, the transmission is coming from multiple sources throughout the system, not just from Earth, but from locations near Jupiter, around Saturn's moons, from the asteroid belt, even from beyond Pluto. I'm picking up at least 30 different transmission points, but none of them are showing up on our long-range sensors." "How is that possible?" Captain Barnes demanded. Wilson shook his head in bewilderment. "The signals are definitely artificial, definitely coordinated, but I can't pinpoint exact locations. It's like they're coming from ships or stations that our sensors can't detect." Cole felt his confidence wavering for the first time in his military career. Every conquest had followed predictable patterns. Opposition was either visible and could be destroyed, or it was weak and could be ignored. But invisible opponents conducting coordinated communications across an entire star system represented something entirely outside his experience. "Run full-spectrum sensor sweeps," Cole ordered. "I want every piece of metal larger than a dinner plate located and identified." The bridge crew worked frantically, pushing their detection systems to maximum range and sensitivity. The minutes stretched into an hour as sophisticated Imperial sensors probed every corner of the solar system. They found civilian spacecraft, research stations, mining operations, and communication satellites. But nothing that could account for the mysterious transmissions. Dr. Carter approached the Admiral with a troubling observation. "Sir, I've been analyzing the evacuation patterns. Based on the evidence from the planetary surface, this wasn't a panic flight. The cities show signs of organized, methodical evacuation carried out over weeks or months. Personal belongings are packed away properly. Systems are shut down in correct sequences. Even pets appear to have been relocated safely." "You're saying they planned this?" "Admiral, they didn't just plan this. They've been preparing for our arrival for months, possibly years. This level of coordination requires extensive advanced planning and perfect timing." Cole stared at the peaceful Earth, but now it felt like looking into the eyes of a predator pretending to sleep. For the first time in his distinguished career, Admiral Jackson Cole felt genuinely uneasy. He was beginning to realize that he might not be the hunter in this situation after all. The landing parties that Admiral Cole sent to Earth's surface found a world frozen in time, as if someone had pressed a pause button on an entire civilization. In Manhattan, coffee shops still had steaming cups sitting on tables, the automatic brewing machines continuing their programmed cycles even though no customers would ever return. The cash registers were properly closed, chairs neatly arranged, and even the tip jars had been emptied and cleaned. It wasn't the chaos of people fleeing in terror, but the methodical closure of businesses by people who knew they wouldn't be coming back. London told the same eerie story. Double-decker buses sat parked in perfect rows at the depot, their fuel tanks topped off and maintenance logs properly filled out. The underground stations were spotless, with digital displays still announcing train schedules that would never be kept. Even the famous Tower Bridge had been raised and locked in position, as if the city's last residents had wanted to leave it in a dignified state. Dr. Helen Carter led her research teams through government buildings and residential areas, documenting what might have been the most organized evacuation in history. In Washington, D.C., she walked to the Pentagon's abandoned corridors, finding offices that looked like their occupants had simply stepped out for lunch. Computer systems were properly shut down, classified documents were secured in safes, and even the cafeteria's food service equipment had been cleaned and stored correctly. This wasn't panic, Dr. Carter reported to Admiral Cole as they stood in the empty Oval Office. "Look at this place." Every document is filed. Every drawer is organized. Even the president's personal items are packed away in labeled boxes. These people had months to prepare, and they used every single day. The strangest part wasn't what was missing, but what remained. Family photos still decorated desks, but the frames were dust-free, as if someone had been maintaining them until the very last moment. Gardens in suburban neighborhoods were perfectly trimmed and watered. Even pets appeared to have been relocated, with empty but clean pet beds and food bowls washed and put away. Cole was examining an abandoned military command center when Captain Barnes' voice crackled through his communicator, cutting through the unnatural silence of the empty world. "Admiral, we've lost contact with patrol ships in the outer system." Cole stopped mid-step, his blood running cold. "Lost contact how? Engine failure? Navigation problems?" "No, sir. They were conducting routine sweeps near Jupiter's moons. Last transmission showed all systems normal. Standard patrol procedures. Then they just stopped responding to communications." This was the kind of report that Cole had been dreading since they arrived in this GO system. Any distress signals? Emergency beacons? Debris fields? Nothing, Admiral. No weapons fire detected. No energy signatures. No distress calls. One moment they were there. The next moment our communications went silent. It's like they simply vanished. Cole felt his stomach drop. In 3 decades of military service, ships didn't just disappear without leaving some trace. Even catastrophic explosions left debris that sensors could detect. Send a search and rescue team to their last known coordinates. "Already dispatched, sir." The rescue team reached the patrol area and found nothing. No ships, no debris, no evidence they were ever there. Over the following days, the reports became a nightmare pattern that repeated with horrifying regularity. Imperial vessels would check in with routine status updates, report normal operations, and then simply stop communicating. The disappearances weren't dramatic. There were no final desperate transmissions, no report of enemy contact, no explosions lighting up the void. Ships would be there one moment and gone the next, as if they had never existed. Lieutenant Mike Davis delivered the daily casualty report with a voice that shook more each time. 39 vessels lost in 5 days, Admiral. We've lost 2 destroyers, 6 frigates, 12 patrol craft, 11 landing shuttles, and 8 reconnaissance drones. The crews are starting to panic. The tactical display on the Sovereign's bridge told a story that chilled Cole to his bones. Green markers representing Imperial ships were disappearing one by one, leaving empty black space where a mighty conquest fleet had once dominated the system. Each missing marker represented hundreds of trained Imperial soldiers who had simply vanished without a trace. Dr. Carter approached with a data pad full of analysis that made the situation even more disturbing. "Admiral, I've been studying the pattern of disappearances. They're not random attacks of opportunity. Someone is systematically targeting our most isolated and vulnerable units first." She pulled up a holographic map of the solar system, showing the location of each disappearance. "Look at this pattern. They're taking our scout ships first, then our patrol vessels, then our support craft. They're eliminating our eyes and ears before moving on to larger targets. This is military strategy, not random predation." Cole studied the tactical display, showing fewer green markers each hour. The mighty Imperial fleet that had arrived to conquer Earth was being systematically dismantled by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't track, and couldn't fight. "We're not conquering them." Cole realized with growing horror. "They're hunting us." The revelation hit like a physical blow. For 30 years, Cole had been the predator arriving at primitive worlds with overwhelming force. Now, for the first time in his career, he was the prey being stalked by hunters who had turned his own tactics against him. The humans hadn't fled Earth in panic. They had set a trap, and Cole had walked his entire fleet directly into it. Captain Barnes looked at the tactical display with growing fear. "Admiral, at this rate, we'll lose half the fleet within 2 weeks." Cole stared at the peaceful blue world on the main screen, but now it felt like looking into the eyes of a predator that had been patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The hunt had begun, and for the first time in his life, Admiral Jackson Cole wasn't sure who was going to survive it. The revelation didn't come from Earth. It came from across the galaxy in a coordinated wave of chaos that shattered everything Admiral Cole thought he knew about the war he was fighting. The first reports arrived as routine intelligence updates from Imperial commanders stationed throughout conquered territories, but within hours they had become desperate pleas for reinforcement. Admiral Cole stood frozen on the bridge of the Sovereign, watching live surveillance feeds from dozens of worlds that had been under Imperial control for years. On every screen, the same impossible scene was playing out. Coordinated uprisings were erupting simultaneously across 7 different star sectors, all led by beings that looked disturbingly familiar. Impossible, Cole breathed, staring at a surveillance feed from Centauri Prime. A woman who could have been Dr. Carter's identical twin was coordinating resistance fighters with military precision that spoke of years of planning. She moved through Imperial installations like she had built them herself, directing rebels to disable security systems with surgical accuracy. Intelligence Officer James Phillips stepped forward, his face pale as he delivered reports that defied all logic. "Sir, we're receiving similar transmissions from across 7 sectors. Kepler Mining Station, the Vega Colony's New Tuscany, the Outer Rim territories, even the heavily fortified prison worlds. These uprisings aren't random. They're perfectly coordinated. The main displays cycled through surveillance footage from different worlds, each one showing the same terrifying pattern. Humans were everywhere, working alongside enslaved populations with the confidence of people who had intimate knowledge of Imperial weaknesses. On Kepler Station, a man who resembled Lieutenant Davis was showing alien slaves how to override Imperial security protocols. On Vega Prime, humans were leading coordinated strikes against weapons depots with timing so precise it could only come from years of preparation. "Sir," Phillips continued, his voice shaking, "these humans aren't recent arrivals. Security footage shows some of them have been on these worlds for decades. They've been living among the conquered populations, working in Imperial facilities, some even serving in our own security forces." Captain Lisa Barnes studied the tactical reports with growing horror. "They've been inside our territory all along, working in our factories, maintaining our equipment, serving on our bases. They know everything about us." The screens showed humans demonstrating perfect knowledge of Imperial technology and tactics. They moved through Imperial installations like they owned them, disabling defense systems, sabotaging equipment, and leading enslaved populations in coordinated attacks that struck at the Empire's most vulnerable points. These weren't desperate rebels making desperate moves. These were trained operatives executing carefully planned operations. "They know our protocols," Captain Barnes observed, watching a human operative disable an Imperial mech with 3 precise cuts to its power couplings. "They know our weaknesses, our standard procedures, our response times. They're not fighting us. They're dissecting us." Cole felt his understanding of the war crumble around him. For 40 years, the Empire had been expanding across the galaxy, conquering world after world with methodical efficiency. But now he was seeing evidence that during those same 40 years, humans had been infiltrating Imperial territory, studying Imperial methods, and preparing for this exact moment. How long have they been planning this? Cole asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would be devastating. Dr. Carter approached with analysis data that confirmed his worst fears. "Admiral, based on the surveillance footage and intelligence reports, I estimate first human infiltration occurred approximately 40 years ago. That coincides with our initial expansion into what they apparently consider their sphere of influence." 40 years. Cole felt the number hit him like a physical blow. An entire generation of humans had grown up knowing that the Empire would eventually discover their homeworld. Instead of cowering and hoping to be overlooked, they had spent 4 decades preparing for war. "Sir," Phillips added, pulling up strategic analysis charts, "the placement of these operatives isn't random. They've been positioned at key industrial centers, major transportation hubs, military installations, and communication networks. This is the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history." The screens continued to show the systematic collapse of Imperial authority across multiple sectors. Human operatives weren't just leading uprisings. They were coordinating them across vast distances, ensuring that Imperial forces couldn't reinforce each other or mount effective counterattacks. Supply lines were being cut, Communication networks were being disrupted, and military installations were being neutralized with precision that spoke of perfect intelligence. "Look at this," Dr. Carter said, highlighting footage from a prison world where human operatives were freeing enslaved populations. "They're not just attacking Imperial forces. They're liberating conquered peoples and organizing them into effective fighting units. Every world we've conquered has become a potential ally for humanity." Cole watched as enslaved alien species fought alongside human operatives with coordination that could only come from extensive preparation. The humans weren't just conducting military operations. They were leading a galaxy-wide revolution against Imperial rule. "Admiral," Captain Barnes said quietly, "we're not just fighting Earth. We're fighting an enemy that's been embedded throughout our entire territory for decades. They know us better than we know ourselves." The tactical display showed the true scope of the disaster. Red markers indicating uprisings and Imperial losses were spreading across the galaxy like an infection. Worlds that had been securely under Imperial control for years were suddenly in open rebellion, all coordinated by human operatives who had been patiently waiting for this moment. They turned our own expansion against us, Cole realized with growing horror. Every world we conquered gave them another base of operations. Every year we spent consolidating our territory gave them more time to prepare. We weren't building an empire. We were building their network. Phillips nodded grimly. "Sir, preliminary analysis suggests they've been using our own transportation systems to move personnel and equipment between worlds. Our own supply ships and personnel transports have been carrying human operatives throughout Imperial space for decades." Cole stared at the displays showing his empire crumbling in real time. The humans had played a game that spanned generations, turning the Empire's own strength against itself. They had studied Imperial technology until they understood it better than its creators. They had infiltrated Imperial society until they could move freely through its territories. They had learned Imperial tactics until they could predict every move. The war wasn't just beginning. It had been going on for 40 years, and Cole was only now realizing that his side had been losing from the very start. Desperation had driven Admiral Jackson Cole to the final, terrible decision. The proud Imperial fleet that had arrived at Earth 6 months ago with 300 vessels now counted barely 70 functional ships. Reports continued flooding in from across the galaxy of Imperial worlds falling to coordinated human-led uprisings. Supply lines were cut, communication networks were compromised, and entire sectors were declaring independence from Imperial rule. Standing on the bridge of the Sovereign, surrounded by the remnants of his command staff, Cole made the choice that would define his legacy. His uniform, once pristine and decorated with countless conquest ribbons, now looked worn and disheveled. The confident commander who had dismissed Earth's warning was gone, replaced by a desperate man facing the collapse of everything he had believed in. "Recall all remaining ships to Earth," Cole ordered, his voice carrying the weight of absolute finality. "Every vessel, every fighter, every support craft. I want everything we have left concentrated on this system." His surviving officers exchanged worried glances. Captain Lisa Barnes, her face showing the strain of weeks without proper rest, stepped forward cautiously. "Admiral, our scattered forces are barely holding defensive positions across 7 sectors. If we withdraw everything to Earth, we'll be abandoning millions of Imperial citizens to these uprisings." Cole turned to face her, his eyes reflecting a cold determination that chilled everyone on the bridge. "Those territories are already lost, Captain. The humans have turned our own people against us. Our only chance now is to strike at the source of this rebellion." Over the following days, Imperial ships began arriving at Earth from across the galaxy. Battered destroyers with hull damage from rebel attacks, supply vessels running on emergency power. Even civilian transport ships pressed into military service as the Empire's resources dwindled. The assembled fleet was a shadow of Imperial might, but it still represented enough firepower to reduce a planet to radioactive ash. "If we can't have the galaxy," Cole announced to his assembled officers, "then we'll ensure they can't either. Prepare the planet-killer weapons." The bridge fell silent. Planet-killer weapons were the Empire's ultimate deterrent, devices so destructive that their mere existence usually prevented anyone from using them. The complete sterilization of an inhabited world was considered an act so extreme that it violated every principle of civilized warfare. Captain Barnes hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, there could still be civilian populations down there. Non-combatants, children, innocent people who had nothing to do with this war." Cole's response came with the fury of a man who had watched his world crumble around him. "There are no civilians. Every human is a soldier in this 40-year war. They've been planning this since before some of our crew members were even born. This entire species is a military operation disguised as a civilization." As the Imperial remnants positioned themselves around Earth, Cole felt a grim satisfaction for the first time in months. Whatever elaborate trap the humans had prepared, whatever secret weapons they had developed, nothing could counter complete annihilation of their homeworld. Even if humanity had spread throughout the galaxy, destroying Earth would break their spirit and scatter their coordination. "Charging planet-killer weapons," reported Lieutenant Mike Davis, his hands trembling as he initialized the most destructive weapons in Imperial arsenal. "Full planetary sterilization will commence in 10 minutes. Cole stared at the blue and green world that had haunted his dreams for months. Soon it would be nothing but a lifeless rock drifting through space, and the human threat would be ended forever. Then space erupted with light. Ships decloaked throughout the solar system, not dozens but hundreds of them. Sleek vessels that bore superficial resemblance to Imperial designs but incorporated technology that seemed decades ahead of anything the Empire possessed. They emerged from positions around every planet, every moon, every asteroid cluster, as the entire system had been one massive ambush waiting for this exact moment. "Admiral," Lieutenant Davis whispered, staring at sensor readings that defied belief, "power readings are incredible. These ships are generating energy signatures far beyond anything in our database. This technology is generations ahead of ours." The human vessels move with mathematical precision, surrounding Cole's fleet in a formation so perfect it could only have been planned and rehearsed countless times. Every angle of escape was covered, every possible tactical maneuver anticipated and countered before it could begin. The communication array crackled to life with a transmission that carried the calm authority of absolute confidence. "Admiral Cole, this is Captain Robert Turner of the Earth Defense Network. For 40 years, your empire has been our greatest teacher. You've shown us your technology, your tactics, your strengths, and most importantly, your weaknesses. We've studied every lesson and improved upon every design." Cole watched his tactical display as human ships demonstrated capabilities that shouldn't have been possible. They moved faster than Imperial vessels, their weapons charged more quickly, and their defensive systems absorbed energy that should have been devastating. "You see, Admiral," Turner's voice continued, "we didn't just steal your technology. We perfected it. Every Imperial ship that disappeared in our space wasn't destroyed. It was captured, analyzed, reverse-engineered, and improved. We had decades to take your best work and make it better." The human ships began their attack with coordinated precision that spoke of perfect unity of command. Imperial vessels that had seemed formidable just moments before were systematically disabled with surgical strikes that targeted specific systems. The humans weren't trying to destroy Cole's fleet. They were methodically dismantling it. "We are persistence predators, Admiral." Turner's voice carried a finality that chilled Cole's blood. "We don't give up, we don't give in, and we never forget a threat to our species. You were warned to stay away from Earth. Now you understand why. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted exactly 18 minutes. Imperial ships found their weapon systems disabled, their engines shut down, their communications jammed. The humans had turned 40 years of stolen Imperial technology into weapons and defenses that made Cole's fleet look like museum pieces. As the Sovereign burned around him, Cole made his final log entry with hands that shook for more than just the ship's damage. "To any Imperial forces receiving this transmission, avoid human space at all costs. We didn't conquer them. They conquered us 40 years before we ever arrived at their doorstep. The few Imperial ships that survived the engagement fled toward the Galactic Rim, carrying news of humanity's true nature to whatever remained of the Empire. Behind them, freed worlds throughout the galaxy began receiving new transmissions that offered hope instead of conquest.